All right, everyone. I think that we'll begin. Ms. Jordan has started recording. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Friday, Friday the 13th, actually. What I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about the Barry Goldwater Scholarship, something that I think is really significant and useful for so many of our STEM students, especially those that are planning to go and get PhDs and do research as a career. What I plan to do is to go through, I have a brief PowerPoint slide in which I will go over some of the program basics and sort of get some of the preliminary questions about what the Goldwater is, what its structure, what the procedures for applying are, sort of out of the way. Please, I invite you to take notes, and when I get done with the PowerPoint presentation, I will be taking questions. I'm happy to be taking questions both in the chat box, but also especially people just raising their hand and asking me questions. So I'm hoping that all of you leave at the end of our roundtable, not just with a better idea about the Goldwater and your potential relationship to the Goldwater application, but also to have any and all questions that you may have answered, at least at this point in time. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, I think everyone probably knows who I am. What's most relevant for this talk is that I am the director of our university's Office of Distinguished Scholarships, and for the last 15 years, I have been our university's faculty representative with the Goldwater scholarship itself. What is the Goldwater Scholarship? The Goldwater Scholarship's goal is to identify this nation's most outstanding, promising young researchers in any of the fields and disciplines within STEMs, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, at the earliest stages of their career. Those STEMs researchers that are planning to go on to get a PhD, a master's degree, or a PhD in their field, and to conduct research as their career. That research can be within academia, it can be in industry, it can be in government, within the national lab, for example. It can be some combination of all three of these. The goal is simply to identify, to recognize, to promote those that are planning on a career doing research. Now, part of what that means, and I'll talk a little bit about this in more detail later on, is that for those of you that are doing research, that are majoring in STEM fields, doing research, but your intent is to go on to medical school in order to be a practicing clinical physician, the Goldwater Scholarship is not for you. That's an excellent career choice to have, but it's not one that fits with the goals and the aspirations of the Goldwater Scholarship. Goldwater Scholarship is one of the most vital and important recognitions for those doing science and scientific research. It's been around since 1986. It is also something that is a governmental, federally sponsored program. Each university is allowed to nominate 4 official applicants to do competition in the national selection process. So out of each college or university, no matter what the size, each one may nominate 4. As of last year, we have been allowed to have a 5th applicant as long as one of our applicants within the 5 applicant pool is a transfer student. That is somebody who either transferred to UTD from a community college or even transferred from another four-year institution to UTD. The primary idea of the transfer student is for community colleges. Part of what that means, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but part of what this means is that we have an internal competition before we then work with our official nominees in preparation for the national competition. We've got some pretty impressive numbers here. Each university is only allowed to nominate 4 people. As of last year, we can have a 5th. But in the last 10 years, in the last 10 cycles, University of Texas at Dallas has won 18 full Goldwater scholarships, as well as 9 honorable mentions. So we are at a top elite tier and status when it comes to the Goldwater competition. That shouldn't be any surprise, really, given how oriented toward the STEMs disciplines UTD is, as well as how many outstanding opportunities for undergraduate research and undergraduate research mentorship we have here at UTD. We are really at an elite level, and that's just excellent. I love to brag about our students, and so I will be throughout my PowerPoint. I'll just be sharing the names and the faces of some of our winners. In the last 2 cycles, we've had 4 full Goldwater winners, and these are the pictures and the disciplines of the winners of our last 2 cycles. Amazing scholars. Both Jennifer and Patrick remain as seniors on our campus, and both Viome and Mark have gone off to their graduate education. You're going to be seeing a lot of pictures through my slides of our Goldwater winners. Each one of these individuals I've worked with, I know, I've been able to celebrate their rewards, their recognitions with them. But I have a whole slide here for the 2017 cycle, because that was a really special cycle in which all 4 of our nominees were recognized, 3 with a full Goldwater scholarship and 1 with an honorable mention. There are about 5,000 universities that are capable of competing for the Goldwater, and we were one of less than 20 universities in the entire country to have all 4 of our official university nominees recognized by the Goldwater Foundation. That was a especially proud year for UTD. Who's eligible? Who can apply for the Goldwater? Got a list here of some of the sort of basic eligibility requirements. First and most significant is that you must have sophomore or junior standing. One thing I want to just say right off the bat, this is not determined by credit hours, because some people come into the university as first years, never having spent a day at the university, but through AP credit, they already have sophomore standing. So we measure sophomore standing and junior standing by graduation date and by the number of semesters in which you have been a fully matriculated student here. So think about sophomores as second-year students, juniors as third-year students. I can be working with anyone one-on-one if there's some ambiguity about whether or not you would be a sophomore or a junior. But we don't look at credit hours. We look at number of semesters you've been here, and we look at date of intended graduation. You must have an intent, at least be able to say with a high level of authenticity that you intend to pursue a career in the STEMS fields. Now, we can talk about this more in the Q&A. Many of you have been here at this university for 3 semesters now. And there's a lot of fluidity. There's a lot of questioning about the right path, and research is one possible authentic path. What I'll say initially is that you're not required to sign your name in blood that you will be getting a PhD and pursuing a career in research. And we recognize that changes can happen. We simply ask that those that are applying be authentically intending, as your plans are defined at the moment, to be pursuing a career in STEMs. And I'm happy, again, to be talking with any of you one-on-one if there's some vagueness or ambiguity or questioning about that eligibility requirement. GPA. Goldwater has a minimum GPA of a 3.0 on a 4.0 scale. I'm simply going to say right off the bat that while that is the formal eligibility requirement, when we look at the GPA of actual Goldwater nominees and the actual Goldwater recipients, what we find is that on average, the GPA requirements are significantly higher than the 3.0 GPA. And usually, unless there's some quite unique extenuating circumstances, I usually say that to have a competitive application, you need to be looking at a GPA of at least 3.7 on a 4.0 scale. And that 3.7 on the 4.0 scale. And again, that's a sort of rough estimate there. But that is going to be inclusive of your grades through this semester. The transcripts that we will be using to calculate GPA will be through and inclusive of autumn 2020. The Goldwater Scholarship is a federally funded scholarship. It is created by Congress and is funded through taxpayer dollars. As a result of that funding through taxpayer dollars, to be eligible, you must either be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident in possession of what we call a green card. Students, as I said earlier, who are intending to become clinical physicians, even though you may be doing research, quite extensive research in the STEMS fields, are not eligible. The Goldwater is explicitly looking to recognize and to promote those whose careers will be devoted to research, not clinical practice. There are some circumstances in which MD, PhD applications are eligible and may be competitive. We have had MD, PhD applicants that have been nominated and that have won through UTD, the Goldwater Scholarship. But I will say that there are some extra hurdles of facing the MD, PhD applicant. And again, I'm in conversation. I'm happy to be talking a little bit more about some of those. But these are the basic eligibility requirements of what the Goldwater is looking for when they're looking to try to recruit people to begin applying for this scholarship. As I've said, each university or college, regardless of its size, is only allowed to have 4 official nominees, a 5th nominee if one of the nominees is a transfer student. Now, we typically, as most research universities do, get more applications than we have spots for official nominations for. So we have to have an internal nomination process. And so I just want to address a little bit that internal nomination process. Because of the need to restrict the communication to the Goldwater Foundation to only those applicants that are the university's official application, The Goldwater Foundation has created an online application platform that gives the faculty advisor, that is me, a fair amount of interaction and control. So the first thing, if you're interested in applying for Goldwater, first thing you have to do is to go online and fill out what's called a pre-application form. It just asks for some basic information, including about eligibility, and asks you to identify those 3 letter writers that you will be seeking your recommendation letters from. You hit submit. I get an email saying, so-and-so has asked for an application. Do you approve them? I then go on to the dashboard, or UTD Goldwater dashboard. I review the application, and as long as it meets the basic eligibility requirements, I hit submit, yes, and you can get the access to the entire application. So you cannot get access to the entire application to be competing in the internal process until you've already filled out the pre-application and you have gotten an okay by me. Usually I talk to people a little bit before or shortly after they have filled out the pre-application. And what I'm looking for here is simply, do you satisfy the basic eligibility requirement? Are you a sophomore or a junior? Are you asserting that you are going to be doing research as your career goals? Are you a permanent resident, a U.S. citizen? That type of thing. Once that's done, you are able to have access fully to the entire application, and you can be working on it and filling it out. We have 2 deadlines for the Goldwater. The first and most significant deadline is the deadline to be competing in our internal submission process, the process by which we take the applications and determine who are going to be the 4 or 5 applicants that will represent both themselves and UTD in the competition. The deadline for you, the applicants, submitting your application for the competition in our internal process will be Wednesday, the 6th of January, 2021. So about just a little under a week after the New Year's Day celebrations, and a couple of weeks before the official beginning of the spring semester. I am in charge of soliciting from the people that you asked to write letters, to soliciting that letters, and the letters come in to me and I upload them onto your application. For being part of the internal competition, you do not need to have any of your letters of recommendation. It, however, makes your application stronger. And when you are working and talking with your letter writers, I would definitely ask them to make sure that they get their letter in before the January 6th deadline, because your application will be simply much stronger when you've got the support and the detail that's going to be coming from those 3 letter writers. They are not required, but they are heavily suggested. Components of the application. The application has places where you just give basic information about yourself academically. There are 3 short essays in which you articulate what you take to be your longer-term career goals and aspirations. Research isn't for everyone, and there are a lot of people that get into research and they were thinking about doing something else, or maybe they were thinking about a career, being a clinical physician, and they chose and decided to pursue research. So there's an essay that allows you to sort of talk about an important experience or activity in your near past that really sort of shaped or solidified your desire to pursue research as a career? What led you to decide that this, as opposed to any other type of career, was really the best for you? And then there's a short essay on diversity and educational background. There are places for you to discuss and delineate in fairly extensive detail any and all research projects that you have been involved in at UTD, at other universities, during the summer, during the semester. It allows, under certain circumstances, for you to each include research projects that you may have done as a high school student, especially if you are a sophomore. Place for you to discuss in detail specific concrete research skills that you have, as well as any awards, scholarships, activities, significant accomplishments that you may have achieved over your academic life and career. Happy to be talking about COVID and your application in a little bit more detail. But the fact is, since March, not only have most of you, but most every undergraduate in the United States has been shut out of university labs, unable to be doing research. It has impacted and affected every research scientist in the United States, and it has slowed down, retarded, and stopped in many ways whole research projects, and academic plans have been shaped and changed as a result of this. That shouldn't be any reason not to be applying for the Goldwater, especially since everyone who's going to be competing for this is in the same boat. And there is a new essay for this cycle in which you were able to talk a little bit about the impact of COVID upon your research and your academic plans. There is a research essay in which you both show what you have done on a research project, as well as show your knowledge of how to communicate as a researcher with others in your field. A 3-page max research essay that you upload. You're going to need to have your transcripts. That's going to be transcripts that will be inclusive of everything you've done through autumn 2020. So we don't need to see transcripts until the very beginning of the year, once the registrar has got all of the grades from this semester uploaded. And then, of course, your 3 letters of recommendation. It's a fairly extensive application, but it's also a really narrow application. They're not looking at a lot of the different aspects of your intellectual persona, your leadership skills, public service, things like this. They really just want to know about you as a STEMS researcher, as a scientist, as an engineer, as a mathematician. So there's a real focus upon what they care about within the Goldwater decision-making process. So I'm hoping to have a number of questions that you may have. This is my last slide, in which I simply want to reiterate some dates to remember, as well as my contact information. First of all, if you have any questions, problems, concerns about the Goldwater, about the process, about the internal competition, the national competition, I am the faculty contact for the Goldwater. I am our representative with the Goldwater, and I can be reached at dougdow@utdallas.edu, and I can be emailing with you. I'm also happy, as I have done before, to be arranging either a phone call or a Teams meeting if you and I need to talk one-on-one. deadline for the internal competition is going to be Wednesday, the 6th of January. The deadline for the national competition is going to be the last Friday of the month. This year it is January 29th. It usually takes us about 8 to 10 days after the internal deadline to actually determine our 4 or 5 official nominees, but that still gives usually at least 2 full weeks for me to be working one-on-one with our university's official nominees before the actual national deadline of January 29th. And that's where I forward our official nominations to the Goldwater Foundation. Okay, let me come back to you all. That is a sort of brief, yet I'm hoping fairly thorough overview of the program. I am expecting and indeed hoping that we've got some questions. So we've got about a half hour of our time remaining. I'm going to open the floor for questions. If you'd like to type it in the chat box, feel free to, but it would be best if you would simply raise your hand. I'll call on you and just simply ask your questions as long as the microphone on your computer is working fine. Grace.
Hi, so I was wondering, when we are talking to our letter writers about what they should put in the letter, what should we tell them that is the main points that they should get across about us, especially if they don't know us in a research setting?
That's a great question. Let me give you 2 answers. One, you need to, as the applicant, be educating and informing your letter writer, especially if you may have had experience in a large research lab in which your PI may not have been overseeing your work on a sort of daily or even weekly basis. So make sure that they have a copy of your updated resume, your academic vita. Make sure that they see at least a working rough draft of your 3 short essays on your career goals and aspirations, upon what experience or activity led you to decide that you want to be doing research. I would also talk at least with one of your 3 letter writers about the subject of your research essay. So definitely inform them about how you are talking about yourself as a researcher. In the initial letter that you're going to be sending to your letter writers, asking them if they will write for you, if you've not already done so, I also find it useful to just give a couple of lines in which you explain why you believe that they would be a good letter writer. Remember, the goal here is to identify the most promising researchers, and so your creativity, your capacities and skills as a researcher are the #1 criteria for determining who would be a good letter writer. Second thing I'll say, Grace, to your question, because these letters are so very important, the Goldwater itself actually has a template for you, the applicant, to look at in terms of what you should be giving to your letter writers to make sure that they are totally updated and informed about all that you've done. And there's also available on the website a great recommendation for letter writers, where the Goldwater tells recommenders what type of letter they would like the letter writers to be drafting and submitting. And that advice to the letter writers, that's available for everyone to see. That's something you can see as well. So I would definitely go on to the Goldwater's website and see what are the Goldwater Foundation telling the recommenders that they want them to be writing and saying, because that's going to be, I think, super helpful for you as well.
Great, thank you for the response.
You're welcome. Other questions? I do not believe for a moment that nobody else has any questions. Ben.
Hi, Dr. Dow.
Hey.
I was curious about the breakdown between sophomores and juniors in terms of the number of applicants and in terms of the number of winners. Because it would seem like juniors probably have a decently sized advantage in terms of winning the scholarship. So I was curious of your thoughts of, is it still worth applying as a sophomore and then reapplying as a junior or stuff along those lines?
Answer. I've got a couple of answers for you. You are correct that there are more juniors than sophomores winning the scholarship. It's not 50-50. It's more like 2/3 juniors, 1/3 sophomores. But that's still a lot of sophomores. And that's simply because it's going to be easier to identify promising researchers when they have even a year's more research opportunities than sophomores do. That said, we have had at UTD, we have had lots of sophomore winners. But I want to address this question in a slightly different way. You do not become a better or a more likely applicant if you do not apply in your sophomore year and decide to wait until your junior year. And the reason is that you miss out on the ability to work through all of those questions that the Goldwater is asking you, demanding that you think about yourself and your career plans in a really concrete way at a really super early stage in your career. It requires, by applying as a sophomore, that you reach out and ask your faculty mentors and your PIs to begin to think about you not as an undergraduate helping out in the lab, but rather as a junior colleague. And so we have had sophomores who have been nominated by this university and have won. And it's not just one or two. We've had a regular, cycle of winning sophomores. We've had some sophomores that have been nominated and didn't win, but then applied again and won in their junior year. We've had sophomores that have applied in their sophomore year, didn't get the university's nomination, went ahead in their junior year, got nominated, and won. I need to look. I would be surprised, and I don't know right off the bat, but I can't think of any example of somebody who has won a Goldwater scholarship in their junior year who chose not to apply in their sophomore year because they didn't think they would be competitive. Because simply you are losing out on an opportunity to be working upon your professional development. The process is absolutely valuable in and of itself. Ben, I hope does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I assume I'll try to apply this year. So
yes,
great.
Part of what I'd like to just say by way of sort of expanding beyond Ben's question. it's important for those who are interested in going on to get a PhD to begin to think in a very specific way about what type of research they want to be doing as graduate students and as newly minted PhDs. And part of that requires answering questions about what exactly you're going to be doing, in which you are sort of taking educated guesses. You are sort of working through based upon what your interests are, what you're doing at the moment, what you've done before, what you're seeing other people doing, your growing knowledge of your particular field, and you begin to make a characterization of where you see yourself within this complicated matrix of different research agendas. The earlier you do that, the better and more prepared you are. It is a competitive application, but everything in science, everything in engineering is competitive. And so I also encourage a habit of taking great opportunities and going for them. And if you don't get them, that's okay. There's no harm and there's no shame in that. And you move on and you apply again. And that's certainly, given how often as a professional researcher you may be writing grants that you never get, that ability also to be continually applying and applying and applying, I think is really significant and important. So I encourage all sophomores that fit the eligibility requirements and are wanting to be researchers to apply for this. Ms. Burnell.
How does applying for the Goldwater help you when it comes time to actually apply for your graduate work in graduate schools?
Let me give a couple of answers to that, because the answer is it helps a lot. So, first of all, the Goldwater offers you a gold-plated recognition if you win a Goldwater. So Goldwater recipients certainly find it easier to get into, top 5 research institutions for their PhD programs within your particular field. It certainly helps when you're applying for a National Science Foundation graduate research grant. Simply being nominated by the university helps. But I think more than that, the Goldwater, because they're looking for the next generation of researchers, compels the applicant to be thinking about themselves as a professional, to be speaking in their own discipline's language when they're writing the research grant. It requires you to be getting letters of recommendation that fundamentally change the relationship that you will be having with your faculty mentors and your PIs. Many of the undergraduates that are in a research lab will be there for a semester, a year, maybe even a couple of years, but research within that lab's general research field is not what they're going to be. That's not what they're going to be doing. And so the relationship with the PI and with the training that they're getting is going to be short-lived. For those applying for the Goldwater, what you're saying is, I want to do this for the rest of my professional life and career. And your research PI or mentor, who's a letter writer, you are saying to them, I want you to be investing in me as a researcher because this is going to be my career. I'm wanting you to be thinking about what skill sets you're giving me, what responsibilities I'm being granted, what new things you can give me to be doing and learning. And so I think that the relationship that you have with your lab, with your PI, with the postdocs and graduate students that you are working with also gets transformed through your signaling that this is your professional choice and professional career. Yes, David.
Hello.
Yes.
So just a quick question. Sometimes, if we're talking about in the context of grants, what influences what money you get is what kind of field you're into. So whenever we're writing these applications, will the kind of field that we're interested in researching have, as from your experience, an effect on whether you get the scholarship or not? And I'm talking in terms of, there's the hot research fields or there's the not so visited research fields. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. What the Goldwater has shown us, the faculty representatives, is that there's a pretty even distribution in terms of the fields that Goldwater recipients are going into to the actual number of undergraduates that are in those particular fields. And so I don't think that we see within the Goldwater a favoring of one particular field over another, or decision that one particular discipline or interdisciplinary engagement, biomedical engineering or something, is the hot field, and that they're going to give like a tremendous number to that particular field. There's a pretty good balance in which the Goldwater recipients mirror those undergraduates that are doing research in a variety of different fields. It's not totally perfect, but it's pretty spot on. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that answers my question. Thank you. And I actually have another quick one, if you don't mind.
Sure.
In the event that, let's say we're working on something and it's not necessarily published yet, but it's very close. How would we go about vocalizing that in the application, or making sure that we transmit that information in a way that it's like, look, I am almost there? Does that make sense?
There is a place in each of the research experience sections in which you can talk about what's come out of that research. And that can be a presentation at a conference, a poster session, a panel session. That can be a paper. Papers can be under submission. They can be accepted but not published, or they can be published. Work with the PIs that you have been under for each of those research experiences to be able to determine what status any publication is within. Because there are academic norms for that, such as submitted, and you say what journal it has been submitted to. So we know submitted doesn't mean accepted. There is accepted, not yet published, and then there's published. Under normal circumstances, papers that are being produced but have not yet been formally submitted to a specific journal are not cited. There's always some gray areas, and I can be working with applicants on a one-to-one basis on that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Brianna.
Dr. Dow, I have a similar question. So I was wondering if there's a hard and fast requirement or strongly advisable to have a fully completed project by the time of application, or is it also acceptable to have an ongoing research project?
I think either are fine. And I I've seen successful applicants be talking about things that they are currently doing at the moment that they're writing it, and others talk about something that they had done for a project that's already been published. Part of what you're wanting to convey in the research essay, the 3-page research essay, is what the project is, your understanding of the broader point or goal of the project, how it fits into a broader literature, but also to talk about what your role has been and what particular skills you have been developing and learning in your part of that. So that's something that you can be accomplishing both with something that you are doing right now or something that you have already accomplished and completed in the near past.
Okay, thank you so much. That sounds great.
I do think, just as a qualification, that you want to choose a research experience that shows off your particular skills at their most sophisticated.
Okay, thank you so much.
You are welcome. Most of our undergraduates have not been able to go back into the lab since March. There's a very slow movement toward moving toward undergraduate research that we are hoping will get picked up and expanded come spring. But again, we're not sure about that. You, as a student at UTD, are not different than undergraduates throughout the United States, throughout all of the research universities that are working on Goldwater scholarships themselves. That should not be a reason to decide I'm not going to apply for this, because the limitation that you have been under for the last 8 months is the same limitation everyone else has been. The Goldwater has on their website a long paragraph talking to you about the opportunities to explore your research skills and research opportunities in a variety of different faculty-led and mentored ways, even when you cannot physically be in a lab, through things like literature reviews, grant writing, analysis of pre-existing data, designs for experimental protocols and things like this. So this is an opportunity to show that merely because you've not been able to be physically in your lab, you have not simply stopped on your intellectual journey toward becoming a researcher in your field, and that you have taken advantage of any number of other opportunities to be working with faculty members to become a better researcher. Ms. Jordan.
There was a question in the chat where a student asked, if we're taking an extra semester, how would that affect our eligibility?
Ben, I would probably just need to be talking with you one-on-one on that issue to determine what standing the university would be giving you for that. So I don't want to make a one-size-fits-all answer, but I'm happy to be talking with anyone one-on-one about that issue. The university. You declare yourself on your application to be a sophomore or a junior, but when I forward the applications, our official nominees to the Goldwater Foundation, I also, in the voice of the university, have to ascertain and assert your status. So whether you might be, in terms of number of years, a senior, but still technically a junior for the definition of the Goldwater, I'm happy to be talking one-on-one on that. Other questions? Arjun.
Hello, Dr. Dow.
Hey there.
So I had one question regarding publications. So my lab that I work in doesn't really give undergraduates the opportunity to have publications or have their own projects. But we are allowed to help out with projects with PhD students. Would that kind of hurt us in our application?
What was your question? Arjun, I heard your whole setup. I just didn't hear the exact question you asked.
Oh, I just asked if that would hurt our chances in the application process.
You know, I don't think that I can answer that one way or another. Certainly, what the Goldwater is looking for is early signs of more advanced professional development. And doing presentations, poster presentations at regional or national or even international conferences, being part of panels, and being joint authors in published works are signs of professionalization. But first of all, each discipline is different. So engineering provides less opportunities for joint publications than, say, the natural sciences do. And there's a different mentoring experience for each discipline. So the fact is that you are going to be judged, your application will be read by somebody who is within your discipline, broadly defined. And so they will be bringing in the expectations within your own discipline of what a sophisticated mentorship and evidence of early professionalization looks like for your discipline. And that way, what is normal for a chemistry student isn't being applied to somebody who is a computer scientist, for example. So
okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
I'm hoping that's in response, yeah. And again, when you are writing this, you are writing this for people who are in your own field. You want to be explaining yourself as clearly and precisely as possible, but you are also speaking within the language and the discourse of your own field. So biology students will have their applications read by biologists, electrical engineers by electrical engineers, etc. That's something I think is kind of significant to mention.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? These are all excellent questions. David.
Yeah, so another question is, in the event that we were lucky enough to not be too affected by being able to physically do research, how will we address that one question about COVID not letting us do physical research?
Well, each individual is going to be writing their own story. So each person is going to have their own challenges and limitations that they can talk about. Here are a couple of things that I think that people should be thinking of when they're responding to that COVID question. One, you do want to be able to talk about opportunities that you had that COVID took away from you. If, for example, and this happened to a bunch of our students, if you had won a National Science Foundation research experience for undergraduates grant, and you were supposed to like travel to another university over the summer of 2020 to go do an REU, and you weren't able to do it because it got canceled, but you had won it and it just got canceled. Mention that. identify that you had won that, or if you were planning to work in Los Alamos or some other place, mention that. If you were working in a lab and you got shut out of your lab, mention that you were working in the lab. That said, I don't think it's a good strategy to have your COVID essay to be a merely negative essay of what you couldn't do or what you were disallowed from being able to accomplish. They're wanting to see how creative people can be with the challenges that are uniform. And that's where what you have been able to do to continue to advance in your knowledge as a researcher in your field. In any way, if you were able to be working for a private company that had different rules, if you have been able this semester to, on a part-time basis, go back into your lab, you want to talk about that. If you've been doing lit review or working on data analysis with your grad student or with your PI, you talk about that. So I'm wanting these COVID essays to be identifying what you were doing that had got shut down, but what you have done to continue to educate yourself within your field. So I want some positive with what will obviously also be some delineation of the negative. So David, I hope that's responsive in a more broad way to your question.
Yes, thank you, sir.
You are welcome. A couple things I'll say. I am here anytime you have any questions for me about what the application is asking of you, any questions about our internal process. I am your point of reference for the Goldwater. Send me an email if you need to talk to me. If you need to have a Teams meeting with me, we'll set that up. What I don't do until we have determined our nominees is I don't read any application material and give feedback. There are students that I know who are applying for Goldwater who I know very, very well. There are others who I don't know all that well. And I try to keep an even playing field so your engagement or knowledge or lack of knowledge of me doesn't give somebody a fair or less fair advantage. What I do once we have selected our official UT nominees is then I go through every part of the applications with a fine-tooth comb, working one-on-one with our official nominees to make sure that their application is as precise, as clearly written, as well drafted as possible and as can be. I am happy, however, before that January 6th deadline to be answering any questions about the structure, about the process. If you're unclear about what's being asked of you or what you can and cannot write, I will, to the best of my ability, answer those questions for you. We're kind of coming to the conclusion of our workshop. I'm happy to stay a little bit longer if there are more questions. Okay. Well, I think everyone knows my contact information. I am very enthusiastic to show the rest of the United States what our UTD STEMS majors can do. So I am really hoping that if you are doing research or have been doing research, if you intend research as your career and you are a sophomore or a junior, that you apply for a Goldwater scholarship. So with that, I think we're going to conclude our conversation. We will have, probably within about a week or so, we will have my slide as well as this recording up on our Honors College Distinguished Scholarship webpage if you want to go back and read through or watch any part of it. I appreciate everyone spending part of your Friday afternoon with me. I appreciate Ms. Burnell and Ms. Jordan helping set this up and sort of take care of some of the technicalities. Everyone, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to be working with a number of you one-on-one on the Goldwater Scholarship application. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.